Today, for once, I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm not going to talk so much about tactics and strategies on how to grow your SaaS startup, which is what I usually talk about. Now, today I'm going to talk about the framework that I've implemented successfully, and so the how I do it, why I do it, and what the model is. So that's the topic for today. And so to break the news on the topic for today, so it's a new model that aligns growth marketing teams with the sales teams, and it also aligns the demand side of your organization with sales on one metric, which is revenue. And that model prioritizes pace and rewards positive outcomes. But first, before we go into that, who am I to make such bold statements? So I worked at a couple of companies, some of which you might recognize here in the early days, and as Brianne said, at Segment and Drift. And I've built 4 growth teams at different stages of the company life, from like the 15 to 30, 50 to 200, 50 to 300, and again and again and again. And my focus is usually on SaaS, on revenue, and on building go-to-market moats. And if you're wondering, like, great, like, what kind of results did this guy have? While at Segment, in 18 months, we, as I said, went from 50 people to 200 people, about 3x revenue. And at Drift, in the same time span, went from 50 to 300 people, we did about 5x the revenue. And if that sounds like a bit abstract, I pulled the data from the KeyBank Capital from 2018, all growth rates of all companies they could access to. So on one axis here you have the growth rate, and on the other you have the ending revenue. And Segment is up here, and Drift is actually out of the chart in terms of growth. So pretty high growth. And as we said, today I'm an advisor at multiple startups, but we don't really care about that right now. So the first question I have for all of you is how do you compete, right? And when I talk to growth people and when I talk to founders, the first question I have for them is like, great, like, what do you do, and like, how are you doing things differently? Because most founders, and most people here are founders, they are usually technical founders, or if not technical, at least product people. They're focusing on the product. Their thesis is like, oh, I'm going to build a great product. I'm going to crush the market because like everyone's going to love my product. It's going to be so much better than all the others, and so on. I'm saying like that's fantastic, but like what about marketing? And say, and usually it's an afterthought. Usually marketing is like it's not the priority. And that is a terrible, terrible mistake, all right? And if you look at one of my last companies, if you look at Drift, Drift's product, it's a good product, right? Is it 10x Intercom's product, the main competitor? Not really, right? Is the marketing 10x? Definitely. Has it worked? Yes, all right? And so Drift is a great example of how focusing on marketing can give you this competitive advantage, right? And so the thing is like, how do I compete? And so as a growth leader, usually when I come in a company, here's like usually how I compete. So one, I build engineering heavy growth teams, right? And so yes, that means engineers dedicated to solving marketing challenges. All right, not just like, hey, like you can have access to an engineer when you want. No, it's dedicated, all right? To demand generation problems, and to building surface area to bring customers before they experience the product, okay? And we'll go into why that's super important, right? Second, I build independent teams with cross-functional reporting, okay? And I model the structure of that team after the sales organization. I'm going to show you how that works, okay? But in short, it's kind of think of like a pre-sales team. We're trying to give the best product experience before the product. Okay, I split out traditional marketing, branding, and events and all of that. Anything that's not super easy to report on, which is not, let's say, KPI driven, I split it out. It's important. I don't discount it, but it needs to be split out. Right? It's just two different, let's say, models. I trash most KPIs, okay? And we'll go into that too. Like most KPIs are vanity KPIs that are worthless on the marketing side, right? Like visits and leads, all of that, I trash them, and I replace it by a forecast of future revenue, right? And last thing we'll see today is I implement and I enforce a high-paced experimentation framework that is sorted by future revenue. Cool. So let's jump first into like why do you want a growth team? So great, because I'm the first speaker today. The first thing you need to understand, like, what's the difference between growth and product, all right? And the truth is, like, you gotta be humble. Like, it's not because you're in growth. I mean, sure, like, you paid more because you're in growth, great. Like, but like, it doesn't mean you're smarter, all right, than marketing or than product. You're not, all right? So, like, what's your difference? What's your thesis? The thesis is that you do things differently, right? You have a different approach. And what's that approach? That approach is like, it's a VC model, right? It's just that you're starting with the hypothesis that you don't know what's going to work. If you look at good VCs, you look at bad VCs, more or less, they have like a 10% success, all right? It's like they fail, like, well, startups and their investment fails like 9 out of 10 times, all right? Even the great ones. You look at growth teams, you're trying to incentivize them to find stuff that hasn't been found or isn't obvious. If the stuff you're asking them to do is obvious, why haven't you done it before, right? That's not their job. That job is for the product people to build it or for the marketing to implement it, right? The growth team is like, it's an experimentation team. They're trying to find out what your competitors haven't, which means you need to reward risk-taking. And very much like VCs, you got this kind of like parallel distribution of returns. Okay? And so if you're not taking enough risk, you're not going to find those big wins. Okay? And one is like reward risk-taking. The second is obviously, well, enable them to go faster. Right? They need to lower the cost of trying, and you need to increase the pace of experimentation. And that means you need to accept lower quality. They're not better engineers. Right? How do they go faster? By actually like reducing the cost it takes to do things, right? And if you don't know that this is the hype cycle. So like that's usually what happens to your startup in the best scenario. Let's be clear. And so the best scenario is that the bad scenario is like flat at the bottom, right? No one cares. So the best scenario is that there's this curve where you reach like the early adopters who love your product, and like eventually like you reach the maxima on that audience, and then your product isn't as good as your marketers pitched it, and then it drops, and you just kind of have that production cycle from the product side where you say, oh, I need a new feature, and so you launch a new feature, you have this boost, it evens out, and you're kind of like doing that stuff where at the beginning you don't have product market fit, and you say, when do I need a growth team? Well, that's when you need a growth team, right? You need the growth team at the middle of that valley, right? And if you're not cautious, what's going to happen is a kind of a succession of actually peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. And so to avoid that and to compete, you need to do things differently than your competitors, not only on the product side, but also on the marketing side, right? And I want to give you an example of what happens when you don't innovate. And if you look at this chart here, you have the allocation of paid spend in the US. And you see, like, yeah, obviously, like Google and Facebook are like pulling most of the spend there. And that is terrible. And why is that terrible? Because like most VCs that I see that send me companies to advise, why are they sending me founders? Because the founder's strategy is like, I just raised 20 million, I'm going to put it on lead gen on Facebook. And like, how is that competing in a smart way? It's like, so what, the next person who raises 30 million is just going to increase the cost per lead and just beat you out of the market? It's horrible, right? And if you look here, like, so yeah, the revenues are growing, but this one from Tom Tungens at Redpoint is the most interesting. Over the past 5 years, both in B2C and in B2B, the cost of acquisition has been rising by about, over 5 years, about 70%, right? And there's no sign that this is stopping. This was like from, I believe, 18 months ago, and there's no sign that this is stopping. And on the flip side, the ACV of like SaaS products is fairly stable, right? And so like obviously you've got those two curves which like that can't go well, right? If your CAC is increasing and your ACV is stable, that's not going to end well. And so I'd say that the smarter CMOs, like from last year's Gartner survey, can see that they're shifting their spend to MarTech. And that's super interesting. You see that everything is decreasing, like the people, the paid spend, everything is decreasing on a per company basis, but MarTech. So they're trying to compete by saying, okay, we need technology, right? We need to find new stuff. And the last thing on innovation is this, is that there's kind of this life cycle of growth tactics where, you're first to market, it's great. You're first to a channel, great. It doesn't last, right? Because very quickly everyone knows about it and just copies it. One good example, actually, is from Andrew here, Andrew Chen, who posted this thing sometime ago in a blog post. As you can see here at the bottom, this ad banner, and he calls that the law of shitty click-throughs. This ad banner is the very first banner that was ever posted on the internet from Hotwire, I believe, and it had a click-through rate of 78%. All right? Obviously, it's the first, but like, I've been doing marketing for 15 years, and I've never seen anything click at 78%. Like, not even like a get free money thing, especially not a get free money thing. So great. So you need to innovate. And you need to be first to a strategy or market. And so now you're convinced you want to build a growth team. So how do you do that, right? We talked of when, which is like after product market fit. Obviously, once you have enough engineers, so you can dedicate one to that team. And we talked of the valley, when the product growth stalls, right? When organic product growth stalls. So let's look at a bit of the different models of how we can structure the team. Right? If you have the typical model, we're going to have like a cross-functional model. So in that model, you have like the growth pod here at the bottom, and so that growth pod actually like is distributed across all of those teams, and it's okay. It's not great, and it's not great mostly because you're just not going to have innovation. Right? If you look at the drawbacks here. It usually requires like all VPs to like really embrace the growth mindset, and that doesn't happen, right? And so they're not rewarded to innovate, and that you need to understand that very clearly. Like, if you have a product VP or product leader that has like, let's say, 2 product squads, and so those PMs or product leaders are rewarded to succeed every time. If they fail, like if they botch 2 launches in a row, they're usually fired. And they have a third squad, which is a growth squad, and they can like fail 9 times out of 10. How do you think that's going to work culturally? Not well. Okay, I've been there, not well. Okay, and so you can't really reward risk-taking in that model. Okay, and so you're kind of favoring like cultural, I'd say, integration, and you're not favoring, I'd say, risk-taking and discovery. The second model is the exact opposite. It's the independent team. So the Facebook model. And in that model, like you have this separate growth pod. And that feels great because they're kind of like I'd say a hack team or a skunkworks team. And they can do whatever they want. Eventually, that creates a lot of like friction with the other teams. A lot. And I've tried that model, that segment, and basically what that means is that one of my experiences of friction is I said, well, I'm in charge of growth. I can touch whatever I want, from the marketing website to the product. And so I look at everything. I look at where I think that there's the biggest opportunities in the funnel, and I look at the sign-up and say, well, the sign-up has an issue, and I think I could like double the sign-up rate. And so what do? I go talk to the product team in charge of the signups and say, hey, I'm going to take that piece of code and I'm going to double it. What I do here, I'm actually humiliating the team by telling everyone that they did a bad job at optimizing their customer experience. There's only 2 outcomes now that can happen. Either I succeed and I humiliate them a second time, or I fail, and they're going to point the finger to me saying, hey, you see this guy? This guy had a big mouth, but didn't produce much. Right? So that does not end well either. The third model is the embedded model. And though it feels great, the issue that we have is that you're going to have clan wars where the VP of product is going to flip here back and forth based on who has the biggest power of the CEO. And so it just goes back and forth like that all the time, right? And so that's painful, right, for everyone. The last one, which I like the best, which I implement these days, is the mixed model. It's the one that Sean initiated at Atlassian back then, a couple of years ago. And so you kind of have that independent structure with engineers. The engineers report both to the VP of growth and to the engineering, or same for the designers. The reason for that is you think of, I said I need engineers. I build engineering-driven growth teams. Great. Am I an engineer? No. Can I help engineers on their career path? No. If they need code review or they need advice, can I help them? No, I can't. So basically, they need help from the global engineering team. If there's cultural clashes, they're not going to get the help. And so I need them to be embedded in that team too, and to know all the rules. Plus, when we publish something, if it works, eventually we need to make it clean and respect the same rules as the product team. Right? We can't just push horrible code and then hope the product team is going to clean up our mess. So that model is it's definitely the one I recommend, and it requires, I'd say, a very good charter to the organization, saying, hey, we have this team, we have those resources dedicated. Yes, they're going to fail often. Here's why. It's like a VC model. If you want to do that, explain it to your organization. Explain the thesis of why you're doing it. Cool. So we talked of models. Let's go into pitfalls. And I want to talk about failing a bit, because I've done a lot of it. It's my job, right? I'm paid to fail, so it's a fun life. But mostly because my ability to fail defines me better than my ability to succeed. Because you learn about successes. They're actually really hard to replicate because they're super, I'd say, unique to the business, right? Whereas failures are usually easier to generalize. And so the first thing when I help a company, whether as an employee or as a consultant, is what does the boss want, right? That's my number one question in life, that's basically what keeps me a job, right? And the boss usually wants good KPIs, a prioritized roadmap, a reliable forecast of the impact, and yes, good team interactions, right? So let's start with KPI issues. And I said earlier that growth teams should be focused on revenue. The problem is that revenue is a lagging indicator, and the longer your sales process, the longer, or the more laggy it becomes, right? And so usually, demand gen marketing teams look at earlier indicators like visits and leads. The problem is that those are not aligned with the business impact, all right? And so if you look at all of those things, they need to go, and they need to go for a couple of reasons. One is that they are not a good measurement of team effort, right? I can totally do a fantastic blog post which drives a ton of traffic, which is not in any ways related to your business, which is not going to convert. And if I measure traffic, I won, right? And if you look at your business, you haven't. So, right? And it's the same for most of the metrics. You got to think as a marketer, I'm able to cheat on most metrics but revenue. You want higher conversion rate? Great, I'm going to put more friction, all right, higher up in the funnel. If you want more signups, I'm just going to optimize my ads or my SEO to overpromise on your product. Of course, you can have higher churn, but I'll have my numbers, right? And you can bring that pretty far. So I can cheat on anything but revenue, right? And for those of you that have, for those of you that have worked in organizations where there's sales and marketing teams, usually you kind of see this happening, where at the end of the month of the quarter, you're going to have like one of the two teams claiming success. Usually you have the marketing team claiming success, and hey, we have like all the numbers are green, like great engagement and traffic and all of those leads. And the sales people saying like, well, these leads were bad, it's like they're not worthwhile, and like you didn't do your job, and like it's horrible. And as founders, when you get into that, you just want to get out of like you don't want to stand in between those two teams, right? And that's I say the lack of incentive on the right KPI is the crux of the mistrust between those two departments. And the thing is that sales can't really cheat. Like sales teams, like they're on revenue, right? It's either there or it isn't. And even if they oversell, nowadays you have like clawback clauses. So if they oversell to like customers who didn't really want it, and those customers churn in the first like 3 months or 4 months, depending on your clawback clause, they're going to lose that commission, right? So they've got no incentive to oversell these days. Marketing teams don't have clawback clauses, right? So one topic we could have today is like, should we implement clawback for marketing? And my advice is yes, for sure. Whether it's through clawback or something else, you want your marketing team to be financially incentivized to the long-term success of your customers and your company, right? And it's fairly easy with like companies that have like short sales cycles because you can see the impact to the revenue super fast. The more you go into SaaS and B2B and the higher up your ACV, the harder it becomes. The second thing is prioritization, right? And forecasting. It means, great, now I agree, I have this team, they have engineers, they're going to try a lot of stuff, they're going to fail often, and they're going to find something that works. But as the founder, like you really want to like, okay, it's like, what are they working on? Like, can I at least like have some kind of visibility? Like, I'm putting like $1 million on this like 5% team, and they're gonna like come out with something like this, right? And it's not great. And I've been there, right? It's not great because like you have this laundry list of ideas. Like, oh, we've got this like 60 things, right? And it says, okay, well, so like, which ones are you going to work on and why? So like we've got this score and you know the impact and the confidence and like it's a 5.7. And you're saying like, so what does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? Like it's out of 10. Like, so obviously you're missing dollars here. And you're missing like how long you're going to take, right? And like how many of those can you do in a month? So you're missing time, you're missing revenue, you're missing like most stuff. Right? And I've asked a couple of friends for like screenshots of their processes, and unfortunately, it's very similar, or it gets worse, because you've had even more metrics and even more columns that is like still lacking revenue, right? And also this one from Conversion Excel. So I've used that model, and I failed 3 times, not only of having my team aligned, but having the founders understanding what am I doing and why am I doing it. And so eventually we land on like lack of trust, which is pretty much deserved. And so before I present like the new model, I'm going to show you like how we forecast revenue, right? And how we actually remove those vanity metrics and how we replace them by like revenue for marketing, demand gen, or growth teams. It's all the same, right? And the idea comes from my friend Christoph Jens at Point 9 Capital, who's in Germany. And so he has this great blog post, which is at the bottom there, to explain, you know, how eventually a SaaS startup is like any other company. Like you have a funnel of, you know, like top of funnel, which is here, right? Some of which converts down funnel, like this, to the next stage, right? And this one here. And some of it just stays in the same stage, right here, right? So you could have like, you could imagine you could have like leads up here or signups or visits. And you can see here, I don't have anything else but a revenue number. And so why is that? Well, what we did is that we just took each of those vanity KPIs and we looked at how many do we have, how much revenue flowed through that, can we divide one by the other? Yes. Can we have a value per unit object? Yes. We multiply by the number we have, and eventually we get back here, right? Which is stock and flow. just like a business. Like for those of you who went to business school, like you analyze like a business, and there's stock in the inventory that you want to sell out, some of which will sell, some of which won't, and you're just adding to the inventory or stuff that you're producing. And so if you're a factory. So kind of the same thing. And so here's a company which I advise, and so this is gorgeous. I just unfortunately had to hide the numbers, of course. But this is our actual dashboard. This is our Periscope dashboard. So it's really interesting. If you see here, we have first, and this, the first leftmost section, we have the future revenue that we added to stock through our marketing actions. So all of the leads, the signups, all of that, we've added it in revenue. And you can see here it's expected ARR added this month, okay? And it's weighted by quality of each lead and by source from the average of the past 6 months. It's pretty reliable, okay? The second column here is how much do we have in stock? Because we brought over from the past month some stuff that we haven't closed, won, or lost. So there's money left. And so it's how much we added plus the existing minus the last minus 1. In the middle, well, we have the forecast. Based on our sales cycle, how much of that are we going to close between now and the end of the month? And here at the leftmost, we've got the actual revenue, right? And that's pretty simple. But you can see here, we now have it broken down by source, and we have the expected ARR by source also, and all of that by source. So I know exactly the revenue I have that generated, and that I will have eventually at the end of the month. So pretty good visibility. So that's super helpful. Now that we've seen that, I can leverage that into my growth model, right? And so we talked a bit of sales velocity. Sales velocity is a unit of like revenue over time, right? If you're thinking of like kilometers per hour, the US, miles per hour, translation. And so if you think of miles per hour, it's a unit of distance over time, right? And for sales, you want the same thing. Like, do you really care like how much they can close in total? No, you want to know how much they are going to close this month or this week or whatever, right? So you're already thinking about that. Think of your marketing team. You want the same idea. Like, how much dollars can they bring to that pipeline? How much of it's going to close this month? How many experiments can they have, right? And how long it takes them to build. So you kind of like multiply all of the generation and divide it by the time. And you have this growth velocity metrics. And so for one thing, why is that super important? It's super important because it helps you prioritize the highest grossing ideas rather than the big shot projects that might fail, right? There's a typical situation for growth teams where you say, oh, I've got this big, shiny, huge project, and it's like a 1 month or 2 month project, and it's going to be fantastic. Sure, but the fail rate is about the same, right? So actually, when you look at the growth velocity, it shows you have an incentive to do like the little to medium projects. So this is what it looks like, and it sure looks like a spreadsheet when you look at it, same as the others. But first here, we have the impact metrics, right? And we have all of the metrics, just as I showed you in the prior table. This is the actual Airtable, and it's updated every day, right, automatically. And we pull the volume of each metric, number of visitors or number of leads, the value that's been generated through that in the past 3 days. Divide one by the other, we got the average value per object. Then we go into the ideas list. Right? This ideas list is now sorted by the most profitable, most grossing idea by effort units. So that's dollars per day of work. All right? Then I've got the weighted sum of the value. So the weighted sum is like what's the impact of that idea multiplied by the confidence of that idea. And of course, multiplied, so the way it works is we have this like, so here it's like visitors. And it's going to say, well, we're going to increase by 400. Visitors. We have the value of the visitors pulled from the other table, multiply one by the other, multiply by 30%, which is the confidence, and we get to 6,261. Right? Then how long is that going to build? Is going to take 0.4 days. I divide that by that, and I get like $15,000 per day of work. Why is that important? Well, because engineers are building that, and now I'm actually incentivizing my engineers to build faster. How? With bonuses, just like a sales team. Right? So I tell my engineers, great, like if you can get to an average more than $1,000 per day over the month, you'll get a bonus. Interesting thing, they don't really care about the money because they're already super highly paid, right? But they care about winning. They want to win. And so they actually work harder because they want to show that they're the best. How do they show that they're the best? Well, when we have a weekly meeting, and we say, well, we've got these things, like who wants to pick what? And somebody's going to say, well, I'm going to take like this project, like automate outbound project. And somebody says it's a 1 day of work. And somebody says, I can do it in half. Right? I say, okay, gamble, go for it. Right? And that's how they compete. Right? And that is exactly the incentive. I said pace. Right? The boss comes to me saying, gee, what are you working on? I got this list. And the boss says, well, I've got this great idea. I was like, cool, inject in the list. Let's see how valuable it is. Like, I'm not here to debate. I'm just like looking at the numbers, right? And commit on the impact. So these are numbers we can all work on. And at the end of the week or at the end of the month, I can look at 1 week's performance. How much did we add? How many experiments did we run? Who worked? How many days of work did we have in that week that are accounted for, just like a consulting firm. What's fantastic is that if you look at the end of the month and you're saying, like, hey, gee, like, can you justify another engineer next month? I can say, well, I have a forecast of $270,000, and like these are obviously fake numbers, 270K out of 5.5 days of work, and I've got a pipeline of like 600K on like 80 days of work. One engineer has 20 days, so I can unlock that much revenue. And I'm usually within like plus or minus 10%. So it becomes very reliable, just like a sales team. You have enough leads, you add another salesperson, you know exactly how many calls they're going to place, how many demos they're going to get. It's very reliable. Why do I do that? Because CEOs understand really well two things, right? It's like revenue, okay, and sales organizations, right, in SaaS, really, really well. And so I've given up on trying to like implement something else, a new model. I'm saying, you understand sales teams, you understand revenue? Yes, I'm going to do the same thing, but like top of funnel. And so we can explain what we're working on, how we prioritize, how we forecast, and if we give you an engineer, what's going to change. And the new process, as I said, is aligned on sales. It's very predictable, and I can commit on impact, and that is the most important. And that's it for today. Thank you.